Two pieces of Bayou frontage that look identical from the air can have completely different legal rights. One owner can build a dock, lease water access, and tell a stranger to get off their property. Get off my lawn! The other can't do any of that. Today, we make sure you know which side you're on. This is Built to Own.
Welcome to the RE Real Estate Podcast, where we discuss buying and selling real estate in black and white. Here are your hosts, Ben Harang and Clint Galliano.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the RE Real Estate Podcast. My name is Ben Harang, and with me today, as always, is my co-host, Clint Galliano. We're 5 weeks into our Build to Own series, and today is the final episode of Act 1, the Property Rights Act. We've covered the bundle of sticks, Louisiana civil law, mineral rights. Today, we close out the property rights conversation with the topic that hits closest to home for anyone in South Louisiana, water rights. After today, the series pivots to how you actually get into ownership. Clint, this one's home turf for both of us around here.
Yeah, it is. Before we get into it, how you doing, Ben?
I'm doing terrific. How you doing, Clint?
I'm doing wonderful. So I'll say this up front. The experience that you and I have with camps and waterfront property and practical realities of owning something with a bayou running through it, that's real. And we'll use it to make the topic concrete. But we're both going to be careful and not drift from a here's what we've seen into a here's what you should do. The legal complexity on waterfront property in Louisiana is significant. We don't know everything. We hope to have a conversation, a whole episode dedicated to talking about property rights and inheritance and stuff like that with a Louisiana real estate attorney and maybe get some of the deeper questions answered. But today we're here to educate, and action items are still going to route you to an attorney and a surveyor. So, you know, we're not the experts. We're just giving you information.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's get into it. So waterfront property in Louisiana is one of the most legally complex categories in American real estate. The rules combine federal navigation law, Louisiana civil law, parish level zoning, coastal regulations, and a body of common sense, practical reality that doesn't always match what the deed says.
Today we cover two things: navigable versus non-navigable distinction. It controls almost everything else. And the four ways your property line can move on waterfront property. That's Batture, Accretion, dereliction, and erosion.
All right. That's also Batture or Batture. He had a little French twist on that one. So if you recall, in episode 2, we established the bundle of sticks. In episode 3, we showed how Louisiana civil law handles those sticks differently. Today, we look at how water specifically affects 3 of those sticks at once: use, exclude, and profit, in ways most owners never check.
After today's episode, Act 1 ends and we pivot. Episode 6 starts Act 2 with the ownership on-ramps, a sharp tonal shift from legal mechanics back to practical action steps for people who don't own yet.
All right, so here's our disclaimer. We're going to get into some deep stuff, and we don't have all the answers, so we just need to plow through the disclaimer. Before we go any further, nothing in this episode is legal, surveying, engineering, or financial advice. Waterfront property law is highly fact-specific in Louisiana, and the difference between two situations that look identical can be the difference between being able to build a dock or not, or between owning waterfront and finding out the state actually owns part of what you thought was yours. Every example in this episode is illustrative only. Before you act on anything you hear today, consult a licensed Louisiana surveyor and a licensed Louisiana real estate attorney. Consult your parish coastal zone or floodplain office for any actual development plans. We're here to put the framework in front of you. The application is yours and your professionals. All right, Clint, we got that out of the way. Let's start with the foundation. What's the difference between navigable and non-navigable water, and why does it control everything else?
In Louisiana, every body of water gets classified one of two ways, as navigable or non-navigable. The classification controls almost every other waterfront question: who owns what, who can use the water, and what you can build, and who you can exclude.
So navigable waters is legally defined, but in practical terms, water that's used for commerce and that connects to interstate or ocean-going traffic. Most major bayous in our region, portions of Bayou Lafourche, portions of Bayou Terrebonne, the Intracoastal Waterway, the Atchafalaya River Basin are all navigable bodies of water.
Non-navigable waters are smaller bayous, canals, ponds, drainage waterways, and intermittent streams that don't meet the navigability standard.
The legal consequence is real. If the water is navigable, the bed beneath the water generally belongs to the state, not to you. Even if your property line touches the water, the public has rights to use that water for navigation. You cannot exclude boats. You cannot fence off the water.
So, and I think that's something that we hear: navigable water. Well, to me, that's like a navigable road. It's like if you can access it, then you're free to travel on it. The problem is, I think, is the definition of navigable, and that use for commerce is probably one of the things that helps to restrict things. Ben and I were talking before we started recording. We know of situations where the way people understood things was that if you can drive a boat in it, then you can be there. But there are some private land areas that are gated off, and you can't have access to it, or the public can't have access to it, to the waterways, even though they are navigable from a sense that you can drive a boat in it. And so that's one of the things that we don't know about, because people have been prosecuted for trespassing on these properties because they drove through somebody's canal. So that's going to be one of the questions that, when we sit down with the attorney, that we try and get some clarification on.
And
that being said,
well, let me say one thing about Bayou Lafourche, which I spend a lot of time in.
Yep.
Bayou Lafourche is navigable, my understanding, from what is referred to as the Percy Brown Bridge south. That's the first fixed span bridge across Bayou Lafourche. The St. Charles Bridge is the next one. That's a movable span. Then you get into Raceland and Lockport. All of the bridges south are movable so they can be open for marine traffic. So owning property above the Percy Brown Bridge and below the Percy Brown Bridge are different. I'm not going to pretend to tell you exactly how different they are, but one, you're on a navigable body. The other one, you're not on a navigable body. So that's just right here, right outside of Thibodeau is where the transition starts and stops. So, all right, let's get back to our...
And I want to still keep going on that tangent. In the other direction, I sold a piece of property down in Leeville that the actual property description used to include marshland that has since eroded, and it was only the bulkheaded portion that was outside the water, but the rights to the property included the water bottom that went out for almost a whole other acre besides what was bulkheaded. And so that was considered part of that property and sold with that property. So that gave the buyer the opportunity to build a wharf that ran out into this bay. And, talking about navigable or non-navigable, it depends on which way the wind was blowing and if the tide had gone out, if you could actually navigate up to it other than where they had washed out to get to the bulkheaded area. So that kind of goes in the other direction. And even if the land is gone, it's still considered their property.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Moving on. On non-navigable water, the rules flip. The bed and the water are typically part of the private property. You may be able to exclude. You may be able to build further out. Your control of the water itself is generally greater.
This is why my property goes to the water doesn't mean what most people think it means. On navigable water, your property goes to the water, but the water itself and the bed under it may belong to the public.
So a practical question that listeners can ask is your waterway shown on official navigation charts? Is it used by commercial traffic? Does it connect to commercially used water? If the answer is yes, it's likely navigable. If you don't know, a surveyor will.
Let's get into the property lines that move. We'll start with the first concept, the Batture. The Batture or the Batture, or how do you say it, Clint?
Batture.
Batture. All right.
Got to roll that R.
Yeah. I'm born and raised here. I cannot roll an R. So in plain English, a Batture is a land between the ordinary high water mark of a navigable river and the levee or the natural bank. It's a strip that's sometimes dry and sometimes underwater, depending on the river or bayou stage level.
The legal classification of Batture is complicated and varies depending on the specific water body and the specific history of the parcel. In some cases, the Batture is privately owned. In others, it's public or state-owned. In others, ownership is contested. The most common example of Batture is when you go down the Bayou, it's the section of land between the edge of the road and the edge of the water.
Right. And the legal descriptions generally run perpendicular to the bodies of water. So why does it matter? People buy property thinking the Batture is theirs and then find out it's not, or vice versa. The survey is the only document that can tell you which it is.
Concept B, accretion. The fancy name for it is alluvion. So plain English, accretion, it's also called alluvion under Louisiana law, is when sediment slowly builds up on a riverbank or shoreline and creates new land. When it happens gradually, that new land generally belongs to the adjacent property owner. Now, this isn't something that's common in our area, unfortunately. The only place where we can observe accretion is areas like the delta of the Atchafalaya River and some of the offshoots down near the mouth of the Mississippi where it's actually building land.
Yeah, so an example is a slow buildup of silt over decades, and the Atchafalaya builds up annually. Extends a property's frontage by several feet. Under accretion, the property owner gets that new land.
All right, caveat. This is a slow, gradual process. Sudden changes, like a hurricane creating land overnight, again, we don't see a whole lot of that either, generally follow different rules.
All right, moving on to concept C, dereliction. Plain English version is dereliction is when water permanently recedes from land that was previously underwater. The newly exposed land generally belongs to the adjacent property owner.
An example is a small bayou shifts its course and abandons an old channel. The dry bed of the old channel may become the property of the adjacent owner.
So this is rare in Louisiana, in coastal Louisiana, because we're largely losing land, not gaining it. But it happens, especially with smaller waterways and natural channel shifts.
All right, let's talk about concept D. This is one that everybody down here should be familiar with: erosion. So, plain English, erosion is the opposite of accretion. When water gradually takes land away from a property and the property line generally moves with the water, the owner loses that land.
This is the daily reality in coastal Louisiana. Subsidence, sea level changes, and storm impact have moved property lines inland for decades.
So, practical consequence: a property that was 50-foot deep waterfront in 1980 may be 35-foot deep in 2026. The lost depth isn't coming back, and it isn't the owner's anymore. So, a further example of that is if you're familiar with the beach at Fouchon, there used to be a bay called Bay Champlain, or if you're from Thibodeau, you call it Bay Champagne. And I
How about
remember as
Champagne?
hey, that's pretty good. As a kid, I remember trawling in that bay with my grandfather, basically fishing for shrimp. And it was a nice big bay. We'd go in with a decent sized skiff and trawl in there. If you look at the map right now, there's almost no evidence of Bay Champlain there at the beach because the beach line has receded to have almost covered up that bay. And, the area where the bay was is now offshore. So and part of that is because of the way France defined shorelines. Louisiana took that approach. And because of that, it's the high water mark as opposed to actual measured and defined line. So that's that's another part of why we're losing land. Well, it's not the reason why, but it's why it's hard to rebuild the land without going outside of the rules, I guess.
You're losing the land. You're losing the land included in the legal description.
Yes.
Is you no longer own it. And the example, it went from 50 to 35 feet. That's what you own now. So, all right. The next concept is state ownership of navigable water bottoms. Some things, navigable waterbeds, certain shorelines, are owned by the state for the benefit of the public. They cannot be privately owned, no matter what the deed says.
This prevents private owners from fencing off navigable water or excluding the public from coastal access in defined circumstances.
So, why it matters? It's the legal floor underneath everything we discussed in segment 1. Even if your deed says one thing, the state may say something different.
All right. So that pretty much covers water rights. Now it's time for homework.
My least favorite thing in the world.
Come on, Ben. You know you loved homework. I know I didn't.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got homework, and it comes in two parts depending on your situation. First, if you own waterfront property in Louisiana of any kind, whether it's bayou frontage, canal frontage, lakefront, coastal, locate your current survey. Pull that document. If you don't have one, or the one you have is more than a decade old, maybe it's time to get a new one. Current survey from a licensed Louisiana surveyor is one of the most leverage producing documents you can own, not just in waterfront property, but overall. It tells you exactly where your property ends, whether your structures are inside the line, what servitudes are recorded, and whether the navigability status is what you assume. Second, if you're looking to buy waterfront property, do not close without two things: a current survey paid for by the buyer, you, not the seller, and a conversation with a Louisiana real estate attorney about navigability status of the water. Title insurance does not cover most of what we discussed today, and the survey and the attorney conversation are what protect you. In both cases, the next step is the same: a licensed Louisiana surveyor for the survey itself and a Louisiana real estate attorney for anything you find that concerns you. Not a national online resource, not a Google search. Local Louisiana professionals who handle this work specifically.
All right. So I think that wraps up another one. And one thing that Clint pointed out, if you're going to buy it and you're going to have a survey done, you buy the survey. You pay for the survey as the buyer, just so you know the surveyor was representing you. If there's any discrepancy, it can get clarified before it closes. If it's done for the seller, they may overlook discrepancies and just draw a line on a map. So you as the buyer want to get the survey done. Okay, that's episode 5 of Built to Own, and that wraps up Act 1. We've covered the mindset, the bundle of sticks, Louisiana civil law, mineral rights, and now water rights. You now have a framework for understanding what you own when you own property in South Louisiana. Next week, we pivot to Act 2 and open with the episode for anyone who's ever said, I can't afford to own. If that's you or somebody in your life, do not miss that episode.
If the Property Rights Act of this series has put some new tools in your hands, if you understand the bundle of sticks better today than you did 5 weeks ago, share it with one person who you think needs the framework. That's how this series spreads. And that's how more working families in this region get the same information that's always been available to others. I just want to remind you to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, watch us on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe there so that next week's episode comes to you automatically.
All right. So every episode, audio and video, are on rerealestatepodcast.com. You can watch the YouTube videos or listen to the audio there or wherever you get your podcast or whatever your favorite app is. Subscribe, like, wherever you see us. Help us grow the channel. We've been doing this for, it's almost a year and a half, Clint.
Yep, that's crazy.
It's been a minute. And we were talking earlier about the first episode. They're almost embarrassing to look at. Virginia Slim's commercial says we've come a long way, baby. We've come a long way. We still have faces for radio.
That's right.
But the quality of the presentation, I think, gets better every week. So I think that's it for now. Hope everybody has a good day.
Yep, it's another one in the can.
That is. See ya.
While we may discuss topics such as lending, interest rates, title law, real estate law, and appraisals in addition to real estate sales and transactions, please remember that we are only trained and licensed as real estate salespeople in Louisiana. The information shared on this podcast is for general purposes only and should not be taken as legal or financial advice. We may be agents, but unless we have signed paperwork stating otherwise, we are not your agents.